Greetings everyone, John here again with a first look at Doom. We only just got our hands on the game today, but we wanted to give you guys an idea of how it's running on consoles thus far, and also take the time to tell you that it's awesome. Despite what the previews leading up to the game's release may have suggested, Doom is a return to form. This truly feels like a natural evolution from games such as Doom and Quake, and it's absolutely glorious. It's also the first game to be built using id Tech 6, and as we saw with id Tech 5, it promises to deliver a 60 frames per second experience on consoles while using an adaptive resolution scaling feature in order to keep performance up. First impressions are incredibly positive, with very fluid animation, beautiful lighting and effects work, bokeh depth of field everywhere, very high quality motion blur, excellent shadow maps, and so much more. We'll be diving into these features in a future video once we've had more time with the game, but for now, let's focus on performance, beginning with Xbox One. First impressions are strong, with what feels like a very smooth level of performance here, which manages to come close to actually hitting its 60 frames per second target most of the time. Unfortunately, it isn't quite perfect, and busier combat sequences do suffer from drops below the 60 frames per second line, as you can see here. At least through it all, vertical sync remains fully engaged. The two things that really seem to drag down performance here are the particle effects, which appear to be GPU accelerated with realistic collision, and the bokeh depth of field. Looking out onto a busy playfield also has an impact, of course, but it's those two aforementioned situations that really hurt the frame rate the most. Thankfully, depth of field, which looks excellent, is typically reserved for the cinematic glory kills. These kick in when an enemy is staggered and play out rather quickly. They're fun to execute and look beautiful in motion, but the bokeh depth of field does drag the frame rate down. Another side effect of the performance here is the drop in resolution. Doom adjusts its image quality dynamically based on load, and at least on Xbox One, it often falls well under 1080p. But with the strong temporal anti-aliasing solution devised for the game, it actually winds up looking more soft than jaggy, and it still manages to look rather clean. It's the way the game is synchronized to the monitor that really helps, however. Even when the frame rate dips under 60 frames per second, it still manages to feel very fluid most of the time, and it feels great to play. So how about PlayStation 4 then? Well, we actually see similar dips to Xbox One, but the overall level of performance is actually higher. PS4 comes very close to holding 60 frames per second even in busier scenes, with dips occurring far less often. The general image quality remains higher on PS4 as well, with most situations operating at a full 1080p. So it's pretty simple to say that it looks and runs smoother on Sony's console, but really, the Xbox One version is no slouch either. Now, I've only had time to play the first 4 levels of the game on each system, and I selected the slowest performing sequences that I could find just to illustrate how low it could go. The average experience actually feels very consistent on both machines, though the PS4 does have an obvious edge here. Both versions do suffer from occasional skips and stutters from loading and saving, of course, like many other games out there, but this does not interrupt the experience very often. Another important thing to mention are the loading times. id Tech 6 still loads each map separately, and while the maps themselves are extremely large and take a while to complete, you will run into load screens between each of them. Depending on the map, you're looking at between 35 to 40 seconds to load each new mission. Thankfully, when you die, the game loads much quicker, and we actually see it reduced to between 15 and 20 seconds instead. Certainly not the fastest we've seen, but not entirely unacceptable either. You get back into the game fast enough that it never becomes frustrating, and it's much faster than something like, say, Dark Souls 3 for comparison. Oh, and the options menu in this game? It's pretty great. The game settings allows users to enable or disable a huge number of HUD options in order to better tailor the experience to your needs. Don't want glory kills highlighted? You can turn them off. Don't want to see objective markers? Same deal. It's good stuff. Then we have the video options, and here users can disable some of the effects. Chromatic aberration, for instance, can be turned off, and motion blur can be adjusted. All those people in the comments that always hate on motion blur will be relieved to know that it can also be completely disabled. Not that I would ever play it that way. Even better is the ability to adjust the game's field of view on consoles. It defaults to 90, but you can bump it all the way up to 110. We'll test this out later to see if it impacts general performance, but based on our limited testing, it doesn't really seem to drag the frame rate down. It's a great option to have. So that's really about it for now. The single player portion of Doom is absolutely incredible thus far, and I think fans will be rather pleased. The marketing for this game really didn't do it justice, and I don't feel that it communicated just how intense Doom was going to be. This isn't your typical linear shooter here. It's very agile, the levels are massive and full of secrets, and the combat is just perfect. Anyways, that's all for now. We'll be back with more Doom coverage in the future, but in the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, this is John, signing off.